and welcome back to our journey through the Minor Arcana Suit of Swords. This is part 2, and we'll be looking at cards numbered 6 through to 10. So, beginning with the 6. Named in the Golden Dawn Tarot tradition as the card of Earned Success, which sounds a bit obscure, but bear with me. Now, in earlier traditions, particularly in the French card-telling, card reading traditions, prior to Pamela Colman Smith's Rider-Waite Tarot, and if you think back to people like Itala and Oswald Worth, all of those sort of earlier traditions, the Six of Swords would be interpreted as a journey over water. So that's obviously a much more specific fortune-telling interpretation. Now, what I like about the Smith-Waite representation is it manages to pay homage to both. So what you've got is what looks like a mother and child in a ferry boat. You can see the 6 swords standing in the boat with them. Ferryman with his pole. And they're on a journey to what looks like, it looks to me as if they're journeying across a river. We don't know whether that's an island or mainland, but you can see land with trees in the distance. The key thing here is it's a journey that's been paid for. The ferryman has been paid. One interesting little detail, look beyond the boat, you'll see calm waters. In the foreground, you can see slightly turbulent waters. So you've got your journey over water, as in the earlier tradition, but at the same time, this shows a progression from stormy waters to calm waters, a progression from turbulent times to more peaceful times. And this is a journey that has been paid for. So I think that ties in very nicely with the concept of earned success that you have in the Golden Dawn title. A journey that has been bought and paid for, through earned money. So this is, you've earned the money, and that has given you the right to step into the boat and be carried away into a better space. So what is that in real terms? I mean, for us, simply you've kind of cut it through the struggle, and now you deserve something better. This journey is a reward for having, in a way, trodden the path and stayed the course. It's also an escape to somewhere more peaceful. It's a decision to step out of conflict as well, I often think. It's a decision to leave these stormy waters behind. It's a decision to rise above. And then on a practical level, it can also just be a relocation. If this appears in a reading, maybe it is literally just talking of relocation, which invariably, if we're relocating out of choice, that is, we perceive that we're moving to a better space. Back to the concept of earned success. If we're relocating from free will, we usually do that to make our circumstances and our environment better. So that's the positive. What about the negatives? I think progression disrupted. Our plans disrupted. We want to move forward, but we can't. We're being held back. I think being deprived is the wrong word. Restricted, maybe it's just too damn difficult to get away from that conflict. Maybe we want to stay. Maybe we don't want to move forward. Maybe we like being in that conflict space. Maybe we like being in that restricted place. Maybe we just, we talked about the sort of win-lose situation in the 5. Maybe if we've been victorious, we want to hang on to the smugness. Maybe we want to make people suffer a little bit more. Yeah, what's disrupting the journey forward is the question when that appears in your reading. What's stopping you from moving forward? You know, are you being blocked through no fault of your own? Or are you just too frightened to step in the boat and move into unfamiliar territory? Okay. Of course, we've been dealing with the 6, and 6s numerologically are a number of perfections, so hence the forward motion with the 6 of Swords, hence the concept of earned success, you know, of a battle well fought. With the 7, we're kind of into unfamiliar territory again. It's an odd number. The balance has been upset. In the Golden Dawn, it's interesting. It's not as calamitous as the 3 and 5 in that we've still got a blooming a blooming and intact rose on this card. Interestingly, it's sat on the central sword. So yeah, we're not into the kind of calamitous realm of the 3 and the 5, but this is known as the card of unstable effort. So actually what it does imply is that the apple cart's been upset, from the perfection and the progression of the 6. That just got a little bit more complicated. Pamela Colman Smith is also showing another journey on the 7, but actually it looks like a journey of theft. We've got 2 swords just standing upright. It's another stage card. So there's 2 swords standing on the stage. This guy is sneaking away very stealthily with 5 more. Okay, you can see it's what looks like a battle camp, because you can see these sort of medieval tent pavilions, and in the background you can see what looks like a group of warriors. Maybe they're around a fire, maybe they're just gathering. He is making his getaway, and he's doing it as quietly and stealthily as possible. So this straightforward journey in the 6 is now something a lot more complex. If this guy is honest, let's look at it upright and we'll assume he's honest. If he's honest, he's trapped in a really difficult situation. He has to get out. Think of him as a prisoner. He has to get out of that army camp as quietly and as stealthily as possible. And he has to get the swords out with him. So in real life practical terms, think of this as a situation where to extricate yourself, you literally have to tread on eggshells. You've got to weave and wind your way out of this situation. It's not easy. We've all been in situations like this, either personally or in work, or with people we share living space with. We get into conflict. We become trapped. How do I weave myself out of that situation while maintaining damage limitation? How can I get out at no risk to myself, or with as little risk as possible, or without hurting anyone? Okay, so that's not an easy card. In its upright, it's a card of tact, diplomacy, delicate maneuvers. I mean, think of it, there is conflict here, there's war here. Think of this as a prisoner of war who needs to escape, If we reverse it, let's look at the dishonest aspects here. To me, you're then looking at a thief, if you're talking someone dishonest. This is not good. This is somebody. Just imagine if these guys have a noble and justifiable battle to fight. He's stealing their swords. He's leaving them defenseless against potentially dangerous enemies. The bottom line is, reverse, this guy is in it for himself. So if it appears like this in a reading, we've really got to ask some harsh questions of ourselves. Where are we being selfish? Will our selfishness cost people around us? Who are we betraying? what are we going to gain in the long run? Think we've all met somebody in a work situation who's basically out to climb the ladder, and he sees his colleagues as rungs on that ladder. That's another aspect of what's being depicted here. The dishonest thief, whose gain will always be somebody else's loss. So, as you might have noticed, this suit is not exactly the most comfortable to live with. It gets worse, believe me, but that's fine. It may be uncomfortable and it may be painful to live with, but the life lessons in these cards, I think, are very, very profound and worth sticking with. Okay, we are back into the even numbers with the number 8, but then again, with a suit as difficult as swords and with an object as difficult as a sword, even stability can be uncomfortable at times. So this is a very obscure title in the Golden Dawn. They refer to the 8 of Swords as the card of shortened force, which quite frankly in modern terms doesn't really mean much to us. I prefer the title on the Aleister Crowley 8 of Swords, the Crowley Thoth, painted by Frieda Harris. He refers to it as the card of interference, and in a way that's what shortened force is. Think of the force of the sword, blunted, curtailed. So you have the even number of the 8, which has positive connotations in other decks, but actually it's the only, I suppose, in a way as positive as it can get in this deck is like conflict curtailed, sword edges blunted. But then this isn't a very positive image, but it does, to me, it sums up the conundrum of this suit. There we go. We've got castle on a high hill, on a high cliff actually, in the background. Woman on what looks like a shoreline or a beach. She is blindfolded and she's tied up. But it's difficult to say how tight those bonds are. Quite frankly, they don't look very tight. She could potentially work her way out of them. She, on first sight, she looks as if she's surrounded by 8 swords and hemmed in, but she's not. They're actually all behind her. She could, in theory, walk away. She could, in theory, pull her arms out of those bonds. They look like loosely tied cloth. Once she's walked away, she could potentially lift that blindfold. Yeah, this is just, to me, this is a conundrum of a card. Interference. Best way for me to put this, maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. I've always seen this as not being able to see the wood for the trees. There is a way out here, because the 8 is a positive number, and she's not surrounded by those swords. There's nobody wielding those swords, but she's kind of blindfolded and tied up. She's kind of got to find her way out of those bonds and lift the blindfold before she can actually see. Maybe she doesn't realise that she can get out of them. So yeah, I always interpret this as not being able to see the woods for the trees. This is kind of having to maybe get an external opinion so that, to help you see through your blinkers. Maybe she needs somebody to tell her, actually, just, wriggle yourself around a bit. You can get out of those. And then once you've finished, just pull the blindfold off your eyes and you can see that you're actually a lot freer than you thought, Reverse it. Yeah, to me that becomes more serious. Maybe, if it's reversed, any chance she had of getting free is maybe curtailed. I think if it's reversed, I see this as pointing to somebody being genuinely trapped. Not being able to see the wood for the trees is one thing, but then actually not being able to rely on a second opinion or find an objective second opinion or even know somebody who can help you and guide you, then that becomes really isolating. The irony is, it's actually the isolation that is the problem more than the supposed trap, because yeah, she could get out. But yeah, when this appears, this is when we can't just rely on ourselves. We do need the input of others, and we do need a little bit of help to actually see what's the right way through. The realm of swords, the realm of conflict, the realm of the mind is never easy. Cutting through to the truth is never easy. Winning battles, that's never easy. And I think, yeah, when you've got an 8, which should be a positive card, showing you that kind of makes you realise that, yeah, these are the times in life when, yeah, it's not straightforward. Okay. Now, the last 2 cards in the suit of swords. Swords are a bleak emblem, and the 9 and the 10 become bleaker. There is no happy ending in this suit, unfortunately. And the 9 of swords, I would probably say, is my least favourite card in the deck because of what it represents. In the Golden Dawn tradition, the 9 is referred to as despair and cruelty. And I think that's exactly what Pamela Colman Smith depicts here. You can see somebody waking up from a bad dream, the 9 swords are hovering over her. If you look closely on this deck, I probably can't show you on camera, but actually if you've bought a copy of this deck for yourself, look at the carvings on the base of the bed. Marcus Katz and Tally Goodwin in Secrets of the Waite Smith Tarot liken this to a scene depicting Cain murdering Abel. And they go into Pamela's inspirations and a lot of the iconography that she sought to depict in here. Very, very good book, worth reading. The murder of Abel was an act of needless and selfish cruelty. That's what this card shows. No more, no less. Cruelty and the despair around it, This is a conflict which has no justification. There is a very clear winner and a very clear loser here. And actually, when this card appears in a reading, it really does show the consequences, because when I designed my own deck, the Healing Light Tarot, I put the symbol of a mandala in each card. And what I wanted to show was that even in the darkest places, I wanted that symbol to point to where the healing was and where the healing was to be found in that image. This was one of the few cards where I realised that I couldn't actually do that straightforwardly. So what I did was I put the mandala in the card, but I put it around the swords, and the mandala was black. Because what I wanted to show was that actually, this is one of the few cards in the tarot where there is no happy ending or no light at the end of the tunnel. And that's how I see cruelty. Cruelty is exactly what it says. Cruelty is needless, Conflict is inevitable. Cruelty doesn't have to be, We will always find situations where we come into conflict with people in our lives. It's down to us to actually resolve that conflict in a way that shows respect. If we can possibly do that, we all fail miserably. And I point 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 fingers back at myself in that instance. And I can think of plenty of times where I failed miserably at that. That's what this card talks about. Despair and cruelty. We hope in most situations that they can be avoidable. This card points to when it isn't avoidable. And when it appears in a reading, we have to ask some very harsh questions of ourselves and our own conduct. And that's one of the reasons why I dislike this card so much. Not because this card is wrong, but actually this card makes me feel uncomfortable. And if it's making us feel uncomfortable in a reading, it's doing its job, because we can all relate to that. We've all been on the receiving end of cruelty, some to a greater extent than others. And sadly, we've all been cruel. I don't know a human being that hasn't. But when this appears, we've really got to ask some tough questions. And this is what I love about the tarot. The tarot, when it's doing its job, does not water things down. It shouldn't have to. This is the best example. Okay? If we reverse it, is there any positive out of this? I would like to think that if this card is reversed, or if we're looking at its reverse aspect, its upright aspect is, you know, hideously black as far as I'm concerned. Hopefully if it's reversed, that cruelty is blunted, that cruelty is restricted. Maybe there have been boundaries put around somebody's cruel behaviour, or we are justifiably being fought back against if we are displaying cruel behaviour. Again, if it appears like this in a reading, or if you're looking at it from its reverse aspect, it's still a call to account, which means that it is probably one of the most uncomfortable cards, if not the most uncomfortable card in the deck. Just because it's uncomfortable, it doesn't mean to say that it's unnecessary. It's probably the card that very often we all need to see the most and face up to the most, so there we have it. Doesn't get better. The Ten of Swords. If the 9 is an initial culmination of the sequence, then the 10 shows the final outcome, and there you have the inevitable outcome of cruelty. I think that speaks for itself, doesn't it? A man dead with 10 swords in his back and in his head. There's what this in the Golden Dawn system is referred to as the card of ruin. So the 9 is the card of cruelty, which means the 9 is a very active card. It's a very in progress card. The 10 shows the results. So in effect, that's where it all ends, you know. And with a suit like the suit of swords, you know, doesn't it say it all? That is the result of needless cruelty. Now, ironically, to me, this is not hopeless. I mean, seen in its literal sense, it's extremely sobering. You know, this is the battle lost with huge consequences. It's not the skirmish of the 5. You know, it's not the winners and losers who walk away, the losers licking their wounds, the winner looking smug. This just got serious. You know, this is where somebody has lost the battle at great personal cost to themselves. Quite frankly, the winner is nowhere in sight. They've run off, you know. Now, in those terms, in terms of conflict, when this appears, it points to those painful no-win situations in our lives. And we kind of just actually have to face up to what's been lost, and grieve it and live through it and move on. Let's just clarify before we go any further. This does not denote physical death. Nothing in the tarot should be used to predict physical death. I'm a firm believer in that. I think everybody has their allocated time. It's not for us as tarot readers to be asking questions about that. And I think if this appears in a reading, it talks about endings, and it talks about cruel endings. It talks about irreversible endings, and it gets us to face very much the price we've paid and what we've lost, what we can't get back. Because actually what this does denote is what we can't get back. That doesn't mean to say that we can't move on. This sky is hideously black and stormy, but look at the horizon. To me, that's a sunrise. So what it says is that don't underestimate this. You know, there are times in life when we really pay the price and we pay it painfully, but there is always hope. You know, what this actually gets us to focus on is the reality of what we've lost, the reality of the damage that's been done, but it also encourages us to look to the sunrise. Now, that might seem strange because, quite frankly, he's as dead as they come. But again, this is not talking about physical death. The dead body here is a metaphor. So we have to look at that body on this card and say, which part of my life is not coming forward with me? What have I lost? What do I have to let go of? And then the best we can hope for with this 10 is to take another journey over the water into that sunrise. You know, it shows us that actually there are times in life when, you know, we face losses that actually will leave our lives indelibly changed. You know, most of those times, those losses feel incredibly cruel. But, you know, that sunrise on that card gives me hope and shows that we can move forward. So if it appears in a reading, that's what it's talking about. If we reverse it, does it change? I don't know. I don't think it does. Yeah, you can't resurrect that dead body even by turning it upside down, can you? You don't change the sunrise. You know, it's still a sunrise. I personally don't think that this card is double-sided in quite the same way that some of the others are. It just is. Maybe if this is reversed, some people would look at it and say, well, maybe it kind of blunts the impact. Maybe if it's reversed, we're moving forward a little bit more quickly. I don't know. That's one that I think that you would have to build your own relationship with this card in a similar way that you would with the Nine of Swords. And actually, there's times when I will come up with meanings for these cards. And actually, if you're saying, no, I don't agree with him, then that's when you know you're really starting to engage with these. But in particular with a card like this, I think this is one of those key ones that you've just got to engage with and work with and form your own conclusions with. So that brings us to the end of our journey through the numbered suit of swords. We've gone 1 to 10. That just leaves us now to deal with the 4 cult cards in the next lesson. If you've enjoyed this lesson and found it helpful, please hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel to find out when I share new videos or go live. You can also find me on Instagram at Chris Butler Artist, on Twitter at Butler Tarot, and on Facebook at The Sacred Tarot. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.